Hi, I'm Chris Cooper. Join me for the Family Plot, Gardening in the Mid-South. Each week, my guests and I tackle interesting gardening problems, from planning to planting to maintenance to harvest. We'll also answer your emails and letters and give you great tips so you can keep your family plots green and growing.
Saturdays at 6 p.m. You're watching WLAE, New Orleans Public Television.
Inside New Orleans Sports with Eric Asher is underwritten by...
At Villery's Florist, we deliver the magic of flowers 7 days a week to the North Shore and South Shore in the New Orleans area. Whether it's for birthday parties, baby celebrations, Villery's provides colorful floral displays for all. With a store full of fresh-cut flowers, exotic tropical flowers, orchids, roses, and even fruit baskets, our goal is to make your vision a reality. Villery's Florist, proudly serving Louisiana since 1969.
Dave Miette Insurance Agency. Auto, home, flood, business, 504-556-0809. Dave Miette, INSagency.com.
For over 48 years, Southern Tires and Auto Repair has provided services across the New Orleans metro area. Southern Tires offers a range of tires for all vehicles and ATVs. We also have a full suite of auto repair options, including brake repair, rim repair, custom exhaust, steering and suspension, tire siping, and so much more. Southern Tires and Auto Repair, 2550 Hickory Avenue in Metairie.
CNC Drugs is a family-owned pharmacy that's been serving Southeast Louisiana for over 50 years. Whether you need help taking care of an elderly family member, a growing child, or even a pet, CNC provides patient-centered care for your entire family. CNC Drugs, large enough to serve you, small enough to know you. Locations in Mandeville and Araby.
Good afternoon and welcome to another edition of Inside New Orleans Sports. I'm your host, Eric Asher. Over the next hour, we will cover the Saints, LSU, Tulane, Pelicans. We'll talk college baseball. We'll talk about the Lady Tigers National Championship. And, of course, we'll talk about the Pelicans. Looks like they're going to be in the playoffs now. Will they be in the play-in tournament, or will they eke out of that play-in tournament with 2 games left on the docket for them? All that are here on Inside New Orleans Sports today. And, of course, one of the best panels we had. I invited them back together because I think they're both so knowledgeable. And, of course, it's Jude Young of CrescentCitySports.com, also 106.1 FM All Access, and the voice of UNO basketball. Joining him is Guerry Smith of the Wave Report and also NOLA.com. Gentlemen, welcome to the show. Always good to have you. And happy Easter to each and every one of you.
Thank you very much.
Guys, let's get started as we always do. Want to let people know what you guys are involved in, how they can find you. Jude, you're up first.
Undoubtedly, my day-to-day is CrescentCitySports.com, so check us out for coverage of all local sports and across Louisiana. And of course, we know during this time of year that high school baseball is a big thing that we broadcast into the summer, where the Crescent City Sports Prep Summer League is set to come back for a second straight year. So a lot to check out on Crescent City Sports if you love our high school coverage, but we're keeping our eye on the upcoming Saints NFL draft. Clearly what's going on with the Pelicans right now late in the regular season. And I talk a little bit about that on Tuesday nights at 6 o'clock on 106.1 FM, part of our All Access hour block that follows Eric Asher's show on the radio.
Of course, don't forget about the Three Tailgaters, part of, again, 106.1 and also Crescent City Sports. Ed Daniels, Ken Trahan, longest running sports radio show in the city. That's 10 to noon on 106.1 FM as well. Guerry, welcome back. Tell the folks about your fantastic website. Sure. And of course, you're doing pretty much everything for NOLA.com when it comes to the local teams now.
Yeah, I'm NOLA.com beat writer for Tulane, cover UNO some too. some other schools in the region a little bit, and my website, thewavereport.com, tulane.rivals.com, just full coverage of Tulane.
And the best coverage of Tulane. And if you're a Tulane fan, I recommend you highly, again, getting involved with that website. You'll be the first to know what's going on with the Wave, and especially now with the Wave being so hot. Everybody wants to know what's going on with the Green Wave. So again, thewavereport.com. All right, guys, let's start off with something unusual on this program. Women's basketball, which again, the national champions, the LSU Tigers, 102-85 over Iowa. The transformation from 9 wins 2 years ago to a national championship with Kim Mulkey. I mean, I talked about this on the radio. Been some really great teams and some great players at LSU and great coaches when you think about it. You think about, Pettit and Maravich and Shaq and Augustus and Fowles, and you talk about Sue Gunther and Dale Brown, on the basketball side. But all those banners in the PMAC, there's not one national championship banner up there. And with 9 transfers in the transfer portal, NIL money, Kim Mulkey was able to fulfill her promise when she left Baylor to come to LSU, and within 2 years gets a national championship. Your thoughts?
It's interesting how women's basketball is starting to mirror men's basketball in the ways that we know about, like the transfer portal, but as well as it's becoming a bit more competitive at the top. It doesn't have the depth like we saw in the men's tournament this year, but it's got more depth. We saw an 8 seed beat a 1 seed in the second round. We see an LSU team that was a 3 seed go to the title. More competitive games. So I think that's good for the sport, and that opened the door for Kim Mulkey, who hasn't finished building what she's going to have when it's all said and done. Michaela Williams, the best recruit in the country, about to come in with a big class. I think even she's surprised that they were this good this quickly, 2 years in off of a single-digit win season, and win the whole thing with a 2-loss team. It's tremendous. You have to be a little bit lucky, but really good to have that type of success. And we know Kim Mulkey with 3 national championships before this one. There's no doubt that she's a Hall of Fame coach, one of the greatest figures in the game, and such a masterful hire by Scott Woodward. The future's so bright for their basketball program at a time where women's basketball on the college level, it's going to take something different and more time for the pro level to get to this point. But the college level, you saw by the ratings, it's a growing product and a good time to be involved in it and to be a winner like LSU's going to be for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, I agree. Gary, what's your take?
Yeah, this is all about Kim Mulkey. She's a transcendent, unbelievable coach. They did not have the best team in the country this year. And the telltale sign, they only lost 2 games all year, and they were a 3 seed in the NCAA tournament because they didn't really, the SEC's down as to where it used to be. They didn't play a tough non-conference schedule. I was stunned, though, that they were a number 3 seed because they lost 2 games and Kim Mulkey's the coach. Any team she's coaching has a chance, and they did things that great coach teams do. You have a reserve who's only averaging 8 points a game come in and hit 7 threes and 7 shots in the first half in the championship game and turn that into an easy win. In other games when they had to win an incredibly ugly game against Miami in the regional final where it got mucked up, they were able to do that. Her team, really well-coached teams can win in a lot of different ways, and LSU proved that in the NCAA tournament.
You mentioned her early non-conference schedule, and of course a lot of people criticized her for that, but it was by design. She said that, look, I got 9 new players coming in. I got to mesh these players, got to see what I have. It did hurt them in a lot of cases, but again, they were able to get through the SEC schedule with only a loss to South Carolina in the regular season and Tennessee in the SEC championship, and she's been a program changer everywhere she's been. It's amazing that people are rediscovering her. Those that grew up in my time remember her from, you're talking about a high school champion at Hammond. She was an NCAA champion at Louisiana Tech, AIAW champion at Louisiana Tech. 2 gold medals, one in the Pan American Games, one in the Olympics. She also had a Jones Cup, 2 Olympic gold medals, 1 Pan American medal, 1 Jones Cup medal, and now a 4-time NCAA champion as a head coach. Amazing. And again, I think she touched a lot of the people in this Louisiana's hearts by, again, wanting to come home, doing it at LSU, and again, doing it so quickly, and looks like, again, as you guys mentioned, the future's bright.
There's no question that Kramer Robertson's influence to get her to come home. Her son, the former LSU baseball player, who's now in the Cardinals organization, been in the big leagues a bit already. That connection and her coming to LSU to see him play, hearing a lot of the fans saying, we'd love to have you as the coach, that sort of came together at just the right time. While Baylor, she was having some issues of not getting everything she needed and was doing amazing things, even though in a Power 5 league at a place that's still pretty difficult to build the power that she was able to build. It just shows that she is, as he said, transcendent. Wherever she goes, she's going to win and win big. But what she did this year, again, probably the greatest coaching job of her career.
She's going to have much better teams than this in the future. Now, she's not going to win national championships every year because it doesn't work that way, but they're going to be in the running for a national championship every single year that she's coached moving forward. Now, they caught a break this year with South Carolina losing. That was the one team they probably couldn't beat, but you play who's in front of you, they put themselves in position to win it, and in the next year, I'm not sure there's going to be a South Carolina in there. They may be the South Carolina that teams are going to have to beat.
Well, Jude mentioned it, #1 recruiting class in the nation coming in, and you know, based on what she was able to do in the transfer portal by getting some of the best players off other teams to commit to LSU, that's going to happen again.
Imagine if LSU were adding a Caitlin Clark. Some people are comparing Michaela Williams from Parkway High up in Northwest Louisiana to Caitlin Clark. So that level of player. So that's going to be added to the mix with Angel Reese coming back and a good core of players, even some who didn't see the floor that much, who she's developing, who will be ready for the spotlight moving forward. It's just going to be a ridiculous product to watch, and I feel bad for Matt McMahon on the men's side because he better figure out a way to win because usually don't get pressure from the women's side, but he's going to.
Well, and that's where I want to go next, and I'm going to come back to Kim Mulkey in a second, but she has really set the bar for all basketball teams in Louisiana, men and women's, because of, again, use of the transfer portal, NIL. I've talked about it on the radio show this week. LSU's got both. You look at Tulane, they're working on the NIL, right? UNO's kind of at a disadvantage with NIL. But again, in UNO's case and in Tulane's case, when they have a really good player, a lot of times the big boys are going to come in and try to take that player. Just the opposite for LSU. Tremendous amount of pressure on McMahon now, who went after mid-major players last year to get SEC-type players in the fold this year because of the success.
There's no doubt, and simply finishing at the bottom of the SEC, you're not going to keep your job very long, even if you're new in the job with a long contract, if they're this poor. So they need to show improvement next year. I mean, I don't think it has to be a whole lot for him to get a third year, but by the third year, they better be awfully competitive. And no matter how vital it is to be able to use the portal and how you can quickly turn over a basketball roster, it's really hard to be in the SEC and come from the very bottom and make huge progress. It just depends on, again, how productive they are in the NIL market, but it's hard to sell necessarily to the very best players who are available out there that are looking for their opportunity. But he will get good players, and he'll get people who are looking to sort of advance their brand and their hope for the future. Can he mix the right group together? It's such a tough job nowadays. People think, well, anybody can do it. Yes, but everybody's trying to do it the same way now through the portal, and that makes it much more difficult than it seems when you see it done right. For every one right, there's many, many that can't get that kind of success.
Talk about Hunter, talk about Schlesinger and McMahon, because of what we saw on the men's side and the women's side, the ability to go out, recruit these guys in the transfer portal, recruit internationally, and to be able to turn things around very, very quickly.
Yeah, it works both ways, like he said. I mean, I keep reading that there were a lot of upsets in the NCAA tournament this year because of the transfer portal. That was a yearly thing, because the reality is it also hurts the smaller schools because they get a good player in, and the second he's good, he's gone the next year. So you got to somewhat get fortunate. You got to hit the right guys. If they keep Jordan Johnson, which it looks like they would, nobody knew he was going to lead the nation in three-point shooting. There was nothing in his resume that indicated he would do that. That was a really good find by Schlesinger and his staff. It looks like they'll be able to keep him. Tulane, Ron Hunter, he may have a complete rebuilding project next year, although I don't actually think that's the case, because pretty much anybody and everybody has applied for the NBA draft. But none of those guys are going to get drafted. So unless something changes, I mean, I look, they weren't even listed. None of those guys were listed as top 100 prospects in a draft with 62 players. So other than Jalen Cook, who apparently is going to be leaving Tulane, I think they'll get everybody else back next year. But yeah, it is a different world now.
And where do you think Jalen Cook will end up if he's in the transfer portal now?
He is.
And this is his second time in the transfer portal, right?
He's going to have to get a waiver. I'd love to see what that waiver is, but that's just the reality these days. Schools are afraid to block moves like that because that just hurts you down the road in terms of recruiting when you get a reputation as being a difficult school. But he definitely isn't going to graduate, so he's just going to have to get a waiver. A guy who played like a ton of minutes and was given everything he needed at Tulane. But I'm hearing there's a chance he can go back to LSU. Certainly, he's a Baton Rouge guy. He that's where he wanted to go in the first place. He was behind some terrific players the 1 year he was at LSU, and he would certainly start there. With LSU, I've got a couple of concerns with McMahon, and one is that the team didn't get better this year; they got worse, and that regardless of the talent level, that's usually not a good sign when you get worse and worse. It was a team. They almost beat Kansas State in a preseason tournament in December, and Kansas State ended up coming close to the Final Four, and by the end of the year they were having a hard time cracking 50 points. And then the other worry with him is it's easy to win at Murray State. Just about every coach that's ever coached at Murray State has won. Some of them have gone on to be very successful in their next job, and some of them have not. So yeah, it's going to be an absolutely massive year for him next year. And like Jude said, he doesn't have to win big, but they have to show something that there's improvement going on.
That last point is huge, and I made that when McMahon was hired. Everybody wins at Murray State, so you don't know if they can handle a tough rebuilding job like LSU became. So I had real question marks about that, no matter the character of the guy. They were looking for a certain level of character after the previous coach in Will Wade. I get that, but I'm not so surprised that this happened. But part of what that interests me is I thought he did a pretty good job between high school class in the portal, bringing in some bigs that he could have used a little bit better than we saw. He really abandoned his taller front court players and went small. So this LSU team this past year was awful at the rim and defending the rim on both ends of the court. Now, did they make up for that with having good outside shooting? No. So I couldn't figure out exactly what he was doing. And as the losses piled up until the very end, when Sean Phillips, for example, a talented big guy, played well in at least one SEC tournament game that I saw. Where's this guy all year at 6'10" when you're not getting anything done in the lane, offensively or defensively? So hopefully he suffered some growing pains at that level and quickly learns on the fly. If not, this hire is going to wind up looking pretty bad because the SEC is so unforgiving.
Well, it'd be one, because so far Woodward's hit home runs on his other hires. What about Sless? What about Hunter? In this age of the transfer portal, NIL, how do they compete?
Well, it's a little different. I think Tulane's got the chance to reach down and pull up based on their level and try to find guys at smaller schools. And also, they still want to be looking out for what UNO really has to rely on, and that is finding people that didn't have success at their previous Division I stop that you can see as a fit. Because if you look at Derek St. Hilaire was an all-conference player, followed by, obviously now in Jordan Johnson. At their previous stops, they were essentially bench players or part-time starters who didn't impress statistically at all, but they had either high school backgrounds or JUCO backgrounds that told you there was more there. So that's the key, finding those guys that you have a vision for, that you think have untapped potential. And I think both of those programs have to do that the same, although Tulane's going to have a little bit more flexibility because they'll have a little bit more in NIL. They're in a more attractive league. But still, I think that's the key. Can you find those hidden gems or those guys who may be really coming off of their second chance versus thinking you're going to compete for the names everybody's going to want in the portal? Those guys who are scoring 15 or 20 points a game, they wind up at the bigger schools.
No doubt. Guys, I do want to touch on the Caitlin Clark, Angel Reese controversy with the trash talking, which again really kind of overtook social media and honestly sports media this week. I'll start with you, Guerry. What is your take on that? You know, look, society's changed, sports has changed. There's always been trash talking in sports. The visual stuff that we see now wouldn't have been able to happen in the 80s because there would have been a skirmish on the court. But that's the way it is now, and I don't see that there should be a double standard between the men's and women's game. Some people do. Some people, especially for the women's, feel like, you know, again, it's women and it shouldn't be like that. what's your take, and then how this ultimately was resolved with Caitlin Clark coming out and saying, hey, I did it, we do it. It is what it is.
Yeah, first, I don't like what Angel Reese did. I don't like that in men's basketball. I don't like that in women's basketball. I consider that taunting, but I think it also was way overblown because it happens a lot. So I wasn't making a big issue of it. I just don't like to see when players are going up in other players' faces and taunting them like that. But Caitlin Clark handled it well. Not a big deal, and let's move on. This stuff happens all the time.
I think Caitlin Clark was being honest when she said it didn't bother her one bit because she's the type of player who feeds off of that same emotion. She does the exact same thing. If you've seen this, it's been around for a while now, and pointing at the ring when you beat her, that's not going away. That's the culture of basketball. I don't like it either. I've grown to accept it as somebody who broadcasts a lot of games. It's not going away. And I think the fact that it's happening in the women's game, their greatest influences are men's and women's players at the highest level. And guess what? It's happening at the highest level on both sides of the game right now. So people making a mountain out of a molehill. ESPN had done a story that you can still find on their different video platforms that was essentially praising the trash-talking Caitlin Clark after the semifinal win. They're able to turn it into another story, which is good for business after basically doubling the greatest ratings they've ever had in a championship game. Because of
Caitlin Clark.
Exactly right.
Right. They came to see Caitlin Clark. They discovered the LSU Tigers. Right. I mean, that's what came down. How about First Lady Joe Biden and her kumbaya moment of let's invite Iowa to the White House, and of course our people came out the next day and again just kind of downplayed that only LSU will be invited, but really still some players still a little bit sore about that at this point. To me, let bygones be bygones. It is an honor to go to the White House. You're getting that because you're a national championship. Go and enjoy the moment.
I wouldn't take it too personally. This is obviously a person who doesn't really understand sports or tradition of sports very well, saying something
goofy. But she should know, right?
You would think that.
Been around politics a long time.
America didn't elect her, so there should be somewhat lower expectations in that case. She was in a dignitary position, basically.
So it was an absurd comment, but I've cut her some slack. Look, my wife might say my wife doesn't know much about sports, and this was a woman who obviously watched the game, was excited about it, got caught up in the hype, had no idea what the protocols are or anything else. It was absurd on its face, but move on.
Isn't it all about making the Final Four? Why don't we have all 4 teams come for a big picnic, right by the Rose Garden?
That's just not going to happen. It's not going to. I mean, again, I belabored it on the radio this week. Again, it goes back to my generation with kids that are coming up in the little leagues, in the bitty leagues, and in the Pop Warner football. Everybody gets a trophy. Okay, you're going to get your apple slicing and your juice, and again. To me, I didn't like it then. I was a coach back then. I don't like it now. Again, there are winners and losers in life. There are winners and losers in sports. Deal with it. All right. I'll tell you what, we'll take a break here, okay? And when we come back, we'll jump on Pels. That'll be followed by the Saints. Then we'll talk some LSU Tulane football. And then we'll finish up with, again, baseball. We have 2 guys that cover baseball and know a lot about college baseball here in the state. So we'll do all that here on Inside New Orleans Sports. Guerry Smith of the Wave Report, Noel.com. Jude Young of CrescentCitySports.com. All access on 106.1 FM. And also the voice of UNO basketball are our guests today. We'll be right back.
Burkhart's Air Conditioning, Heating, and Refrigeration has been family-owned and operated since 1989. Burkhart has energy-efficient solutions and offers brands such as Mitsubishi ductless AC units and Amana, the only manufacturer with a lifetime unit replacement warranty. Burkhart's offers maintenance bundle packages that include servicing your AC, generator, and tankless water heater. For more information on the services Burkhart's provides, visit acpromise.com. Burkhart's Air Conditioning, Heating, and Refrigeration, providing comfort for life.
Experiencing rough weather with a bad roof can be a nightmare. It doesn't have to be.
Suburban Roofing, because when it comes to roofing, there is a difference.
Located at 3701 Iberville Street in Mid-City is Katie's Restaurant and Bar. Open 7 days a week, Katie's offers daily specials for lunch, dinner, and Sunday brunch. Serving New Orleans cuisine such as fried shrimp platters, grilled redfish, and a fully stocked bar. And don't forget about our expanded event seating and local entertainment. Featured on the Best of Food Network's diners, drive-ins, and dives, Katie's Restaurant and Bar.
Welcome back to Inside New Orleans Sports. I'm your host, Eric Asher. Jude Young and also Guerry Smith are our guests today. We move on to pro basketball, and the Pelicans, who are in 8th place right now, 41-39, so a winning season this year. Also, again, they have clinched at least the 8th spot in the playoff tournament with 2 games to go. The Knicks on Friday night, and then they're at Minnesota on Sunday to finish out the season. 138-131 win last night in overtime over the guys. Help me here.
The Grizzlies.
The Grizzlies last night. Thank you, I didn't have that written down. And of course, that comes off again really a bad game the night before with Sacramento, where they kind of maybe got a little recipe defensively on how teams are going to try to play the Pelicans from now on, with the doubling of Brandon Ingram, the doubling of C.J. McCollum, and just so happened that last night you had a situation where Herb Jones knocked his shots down, 35 points, 5 for 8 for three-point line, 30 points from Trey Murphy, 7 for 13, pardon me, from the three-point line, including 21 points in the fourth quarter, and of course overtime and in the fourth quarter, Brandon Ingram taking over, but they still almost gave the game away. What's troubling to me right now, guys, is the lack of intensity, the lack of sense of urgency for a team that has so much on the line. Yes, they rebounded in the second half against the Grizzlies last night on a back-to-back, but again, they got totally taken out of the game and beat by the Warriors, where they looked like they had that game for a while, and then of course Sacramento just totally outclassed them in the Smoothie King Center. C.J. McCollum also had 31 last night, and Brandon Ingram had 13 assists, 8 in the fourth quarter, as again he's become more of a point forward and a passer. Jude, I'll take you first. I know they're young, and maybe we're expecting too much out of them right now because the young guys played so well early in the season. But to not see that sense of urgency down the stretch here with so much on the line is troublesome. I got to be honest with you.
You know, it's hard to go for me, and I hear what you're saying, and I know others are saying it, to that area of the story. When it's the bigger picture of it's the NBA. I said it during the break. It is a sport of runs, basketball, and that's particularly true in the NBA. And you have hot parts of games, and just because you build a 15, 20-point lead early doesn't mean you're going to win the game, and that happens a lot if you watch enough of non-Pelican games. It's pretty standard that these things happen in games. I think the Pelicans are dealing with the weakness of they're missing one of their big 3. There's a reason why they pay 3 players $30 million or more a year, and they're missing the best one of the bunch. I think another one of them in C.J. McCollum with the thumb isn't the same player that he's capable of, and when he's not a consistent shooter, that hurts a lot, so it really falls on Brandon Ingram. And then you have this collection of role players, and if you have so many players who are really dependent, especially on the offensive end, on one star, it becomes very difficult as far as being a consistent team. They've got a lot of young talent, but how many of those guys are your alpha players, your lead dog types? Even with the injuries and giving other players more playing time as a result, I think we're finding that this is a team that doesn't have really good creators, especially with Jose Alvarado out. You don't bring that spark plug off the bench. They don't have great rim protection, and their best player as far as scoring in the lane in a league that really doesn't reward you for having good big men anymore. And Jonas Valanciunas is somebody who's a liability in most matchups on the other end of the floor defending. So this is an incomplete team, and we don't even know how good it can can be with its 3 stars functioning together, because we never see it. We've only seen it 10 times this year, and that was many months ago. So what we see the rest of the year, assuming, and we're waiting for news on Zion Williamson, obviously, as we film this, I just don't think people should be too harsh at this point on the inconsistency of the product, but maybe pay attention to, does Willie Green understand how to use what he has, and does the front office then in the offseason react to figure out what they don't have and the guys they need to move on. I think this has to be a pretty active offseason, and we maybe didn't anticipate that. Certainly not when they were rolling around the first of the year and competing for first place in the West. But I think it's just a bigger picture of, this is a very incomplete team with not enough shooting and not enough creation outside of essentially 2 players, and one of them can never stay healthy. That's a big deal.
Well, really, 2 can't stay healthy. We can talk about Brandon Ingram as well. Go ahead, Gary.
I mean, I hesitate to say anything with any degree of confidence about this team, because I've been on some radio shows, and every time I make a comment, I like the way the Pelicans are playing, then they lose 5 in a row. Where I'm really concerned with their effort level, and then they win 5 in a row. So but my take on it is, without Zion, they're really not that good a team. And I do think at the end of last year, the way they played without Zion, I think a lot of people thought that they could function without him. But we found out this year they're not that good a team without a healthy Zion, and that's obviously a concern, because he cannot stay healthy. I mean, this is not a fluke at this point. But and also, they haven't clinched the top 8 yet. If they play at Minnesota in the regular season finale, and that's most likely going to, whoever loses that is going to finish 9th, most likely, if things, and then have to, then the Pelicans, if that happens, they'd be in the exact same situation they were in last year, where you have to win 2 games to get into the tournament. But I don't see this team, I could be wrong, I've been wrong almost every time I've talked about him this year, but I don't see this team without Zion, and I just can't imagine a situation where he comes back healthy and effective. Maybe I'll be wrong on that too. I can't see this team being, even if they get past the play-in, I can't see them winning a 7-game series.
And without that, the rest of the conversation is pointless, because they're not going to be a contender in the league. They're going to struggle just to be a postseason team, and they're stuck here. They need to get Zion back to even think about trading him if they don't trust him staying healthy, and get him back playing at an all-star level again. And then, will they have the courage to actually trade him then? No. So this is going to be a long and perhaps painful roller coaster ride if he's somebody who can't stay healthy. He's just about to start his 2nd contract. Keep that in mind. It's just starting next season.
When you look at this team, David Griffin said early in the season that again, that that maybe they were a little bit ahead. That this was, you said, incomplete team. Were we expecting too much out of Alvarado, Najee, Herb, Trey Murphy in their second years? Should we be a little bit more patient with them into next year and say maybe to see more growth? Or is this a situation where they really have to take a hard look at the roster and say, maybe some of these young players, we may have to be able to move those guys to move into maybe get a more veteran player that's been exposed to the playoffs, that can give them what they need in terms of shooting, or again another player that, again, around the rim that can help them there?
It's really hard, because if you ask me the one player that I think they'd be best off moving right now and still getting a look at that trio that you mentioned moving forward, can Herb Jones continue to grow? Obviously, Trey Murphy is. Clearly, as a rookie, Dyson Daniels has a ways to go, but there's a real skill set there. It'd be better, in my opinion, if they could move C.J. McCollum, quite honestly. But I don't think they can, because people are going to wait to see if he comes back next year fully healthy and is the shooter and the scorer that he's supposed to be, because, hey, his contract is cumbersome otherwise. So I think that the Pelicans are in a tight spot. The areas where we know that they're going to make changes is, I mean, Kyra Lewis doesn't have a place. Jackson Hayes doesn't have a place. I don't think Hernan Gomez wants to be there anymore, because he's not going to play enough. Those are pieces you can move. And oh, by the way, I think Larry Nance was a good signing, but he's playing way too banged up to be out on the floor if they didn't absolutely need him out there so far. So they're injured beyond just not having Zion. Key veterans playing hurt. There's a lot there that the front office needs to not overreact, because until they see a little bit more of good Zion and get a more of an understanding understanding of how the roster is really going to work together and what they want to do with Zion moving forward. There's not a lot of major moves that they can make. They're kind of in a tough spot, and if they do make a major move because they have the assets to do it, as a reactionary type of thing to how this season has gone, they could wind up regretting it for years to come when they're at least in a position for stability for the franchise. As long as it's competitive and it gives hope, and you're selling those seats and you're growing your fan base's commitment to your organization, I don't think they can take too many risks thinking, oh, we want to be a champion, because if they make the wrong move, get too much money on the books that they can't move, and lose those assets so that they're stuck, and then they're not winning at all, it falls apart again. So I think that's something that they consider that is going to lead to a bit more of a conservative outlook, even though I think they'll tweak the roster a little bit. I don't think we're going to see anything major for at least another till the trade deadline next year.
We've seen quick transformations, though. Look at Sacramento. Look at Memphis the last couple of years. Again, getting in the parts that work for them.
But look at Sacramento. How many years it's been. This is their first good team in decades.
Of course.
So then they've tried different things when they've had stars and they've come up snake eyes, and it took a long time to build back. This franchise, I don't think, wants to go through that anymore. They want a little bit of stability, even if it winds up being the essence of NBA mediocrity, because at least you're something worth watching.
Well, it comes down to Zion being healthy.
Sure.
And I'll give the front office credit for one thing. For a while there, they were 10 years behind the scene in basketball. This has become a three-point shooting league. You better be able to knock down the three, and you better be able to defend the three. And for a few years there, they couldn't do either one of those things. You have no chance. Last night, they went 21 for 39 from three-point range, and Trey Murphy is developed into one of the dead-eye shooters in the NBA. He wasn't consistent for a lot of the year, but that shot is so pure. You've got to have a player like that.
He just needs confidence. That's it.
And with a healthy Zion, Trey Murphy would be getting even more open shots, and that he's a piece now that you can rely on down the road. But it all depends on Zion. This is not if Zion comes back healthy, and I think the odds are against him staying healthy at this point. But if he does, this is a team that can get to that competing for a championship.
And
level.
I point to the front court because they need more players with length like Murphy. They need to do something, unfortunately, about Valanciunas. I don't think he's a piece you can move forward with. You've got to replace him with a big guy who can at least give you rim protection and can space the floor more.
Like Jaren Jackson Jr. last night.
Yes, exactly right.
He's a perfect player for this team.
You need guys like that if you want to actually be a contender. They need more spacing. I don't think you give up on a Herb Jones because he's a different version of your Draymond Green. He's the type of player that helps teams. If you want to be a championship team, you don't give up on a guy like him. But if you decide, hey, Dyson Daniels has some value and I can pair assets together, I can get another front court player who can defend and shoot. It's all about rim protection and shooting. You don't want to give up easy buckets, and you got to knock down the three and be mobile enough defensively, especially in a transition game, to pick up and not give up those uncontested shots. I think the Pelicans are lacking big time in the front court in that area.
Let's talk Saints. And the Saints right now have kind of slowed their free agent moves. There was a story this week that Foster Moreau is going back to complete his physical. It leads you to believe that maybe he may sign with the Saints and just may be on reserve, non-football type injury. And of course, when he's healthy, maybe coming back and being part of the team. That is conjecture on my part. They brought Hendon Hooker in this week. I love Hendon Hooker. But I just think at this point, after you've made the investment in Derek Carr, that this has to be a big man draft. You've got to get defensive tackles. You've got to get defensive ends. With Pete really on a one-year deal and ineffective because of injury, you have to solidify that guard position. We still don't know what's going to happen with Ruiz. So again, to me, that even after the draft, when you're looking at the post-draft free agency, I still think you're looking at big men. I just find it. I think it's going to be tough to be able to take a quarterback in the first 3 rounds when again, you've made an investment in your quarterback already, even though it's a cap-friendly deal. Jude, where do you think they go? What do you think is going to happen with this upcoming draft? Is this going to be a typical Loomis draft where they're going to package picks, move up for a particular player? Will they be patient? They've got 8 picks available for them. And is this a big man draft for them?
There's a lot to unwrap there, but I think you hit the nail on the head with the key point. It is a big man draft. They need interior offensive linemen because you don't know, as you mentioned, about Pete or Ruiz moving forward, and whether you want that money on the books for the production / health when you talk about Pete. that you're going to get out of them. And on the defensive line, even with the 2 signings, look, I like Shepard and Saunders as rotational players to replace what you lost. I think they both got overpaid a little bit in free agency, but I think they should invest there early in the draft and get difference makers. I think that's very important for them, particularly tackle more than even a defensive end. But I do want to go back to the idea of, well, Hendon Hooker came in. Well, so did Clayton Tune of Houston or Aiden O'Connell from Purdue. You get a certain number of visits where you can meet with these players, bring them to your facility. And a lot of that's due diligence, especially the players you're really not going to draft, towards the future, getting to know the guys so that maybe 3 years from now he's in the market and you could think maybe we need to move on from Carr or he's too old or whatever, and we know Hooker a little bit better. So that, a lot of that happens around the league, so I wouldn't put too much into that. Due diligence is a good thing. They clearly understand that. They've signed a lot of guys who are trying to find their place in the league, who have experience in the secondary, particularly safety nickel types, because I think they want to draft big guys in the draft. They had to address the defensive line with starter caliber guys, but you're right, they're not done. I think there's no doubt, same thing on the offensive line. They weren't going to sign a veteran big tackle, or I should say guard, that would require playing him for the money you're going to pay him. So they have to look that route in the draft too. But I also think they want another big receiver. That's why they took a chance on a Brian Edwards to bring him in cheap. I think they realized they can't trust the health of Michael Thomas. And even though you have to like both Chris Olave and Rashid Shaheed and what they bring at wide receiver, they want a big target in there. And the fact that they were thinking about going with Foster Moreau as that more inline tight end to complement Jawan Johnson, even though by far the best position in this draft to get value is at tight end this year, I don't think they want to invest in that because they see the needs greater in other areas than a guy who in their mind would be more of a complementary tight end. So absolutely defensive tackle and guard. They have to come up with guys who end up as being future starters out of this draft.
I agree.
Yeah, I agree. I think defensive tackle is where they need to go now. I'm not even going to pretend to claim that I knew much about the 2 guys they signed. I know they've been popular signings. I looked at their stats. Their stats weren't as good as Shai Tuttle's or Onyemata's if you combine them, but I'm not even, it does seem like people feel like they have pretty good upside.
Well, they both come off their best years. But
they need a difference maker, because that was the biggest drop off last year. Clearly, they'd been a dominant run defense for forever, and last year teams were gouging them a lot of weeks of the year. And I also agree, they got to get they need another wide receiver. Their wide receivers were not good. I know all the criticism was on the quarterbacks last year, but the wide receivers didn't help. And like you point out, the biggest need is a big wide receiver that can make those contested catches, because you cannot trust whether Michael Thomas is going to be that guy anymore. They certainly hope he will be. It's not impossible, but with his injury history the last few years, they have to have somebody that you can throw a slant to and know he's actually going to catch the ball and not have it bounce off his hands and turn into a pick six.
Guerry, do you like what they've done in free agency so far?
No, I mean, I don't dislike it, but all those guys. No, I'm not there. I'll tell you who I like is Jamal Williams, the running back. That was another. They absolutely needed that because their backup running backs were terrible last year, and who knows what Alvin Kamara's status is going to be this upcoming year. So I liked that pickup a lot. I'm on the fence on Derek Carr. I have a close friend who's a huge Raiders fan who never liked him, and he pointed out the 2 things he always used to say is check down Charlie, and he fumbles a lot when he gets hit. And actually, he 2 different years in his career, he fumbled the ball 6 times. He's coming off the worst year of his career. He really didn't have that good a year 2 years ago when they made the playoffs. I think he threw 24 touchdowns and 14 interceptions. Those aren't good numbers in the modern NFL. So I'm not really sold on him. He's clearly an upgrade. And I agree. And the other thing is, I don't agree with the people who say that you have to either have a team that can win the Super Bowl or totally rebuild. There's 32 teams in the NFL. The Saints made 1 Super Bowl with Sean Payton and Drew Brees in their peak. Should have made 2, obviously, but only made 2 conference championship games. It's not that easy to do. So I understand why they're trying to do this, and they feel like this can get them into the playoffs, but I'm not sold on Derek Carr being the answer.
Carr's such an enigma. He's so much more like a younger Andy Dalton, but the difference being he does throw a good deep ball, and if anything, he didn't throw it down the field enough, as Guerry mentioned, and I think that's something they want to bring out of him, because especially with Shaheed and the vertical aspect that Olave bring to the table, you've got to take advantage of that, and they need to bring that out of him. At the same time, maybe just the stability of this organization versus the Raiders, and this point's been made time and again in his near decade with the Raiders. Their average DVOA defensively, where they rank in the league, is 31st out of 32. Right. So he's been playing from behind a lot in a division that's had some dynamic offenses over the years, and now the Chiefs leading the way since he had been there. So as long as they're a team, and they certainly are, that can compete and win their division. In the NFL, if you can win your division and you have a roster that you think's good enough, you do have to invest in the quarterback to try to do it. I don't know if I like what Atlanta's doing going another year with Ritter when I feel like they have made progress. I think they're making a mistake, and I think Carolina better be right trading up to the #1 pick. Or they both could be set back when they are in a position to make progress. Whereas the Saints, at least they know who they are, and they know we're still a competitor. If we win our division, we're hosting a home playoff game, we've got a chance. So at least I get the mindset.
And I have seen Derek Carr play really well. I've seen him throw a beautiful ball and have great games. It's the consistency with him and just the trends in the last couple of years. It could be the dysfunction of the Raiders, that could be it, but you can't be sure of that. And he's not a young guy.
That's why I say draft another guard who can have stability in the middle of your line to block for him, to bolster your running game, hopefully with Trevor Penning caving in the left side of the line, so you can be more of a running team, having a Jamal Williams. Look for another young back to be drafted in the middle rounds, because you're going to miss Kamara probably for 6 games, maybe more. I think they're going to want to run the ball and set up play action to give Carr more of a chance to take advantage of his vertical talent. He's very accurate down the field. I think that's the direction the Saints are going in, and that's why it's so important on the other side of the ball to be stout defensively, particularly in the middle when they got run on last year, so they can complement what I think the offense's plans are going to be.
Same question I gave Guerry. Do you like what they've done in free agency?
I understand what they've done in free agency. They were still handicapped by the cap situation. They had to let guys go and sign guys that had lesser value on the market, but that probably works out well because they didn't overpay. I think David Onyemata's probably about to hit the downside of his career, and Tuttle's a nice player, but they could easily get the same production out of the 2 guys they signed together if they have a plan to add some youth and talent to that. And Carr I couldn't argue with, because they're not going to blow it up until they absolutely have to. As long as guys like Cam Jordan and Demario Davis are on this roster, and you've got stars like Alvin Kamara and the investment they made in a Chris Olave, they're looking to win today. They're not blowing anything up anytime soon if they don't have to.
I want to shift to the state of college baseball here in the state of Louisiana. Guys, I'm going to go through the teams, and then I want to you guys kind of rapid fire. Give me your thoughts. When we're 3 weeks in now, 3rd week into conference play now. LSU 25-4, 6-3 in the SEC, #1 in the nation, first place in the SEC West. They got South Carolina at home. They're at South Carolina this weekend. Tulane has struggled, 8-21, 2-1 in the AAC, 4th place, 3 games at USF this weekend. So South Florida. UNO is 16-13, 1-2, 8th place currently in the Southland. They got SLU at home, Southeastern at home, for a 3-game stand. SLU is 16-13, 3-3, 5th place in the Southland. UNO on the road. Nichols is 17-14, 4-2, 2nd place in the Southland. They got Incarnate Word. They're at Incarnate Word for 3, and then Delgado. Joe Sermon just continues to be one of the great coaches in the history of Louisiana sports. 29-4, won 15 straight games. Number 11, the Junior College Athletic Association Division I rankings, and he just continues to move forward with the Dolphins. I'll take you first. It's a lot to unwrap.
Yes. Rapid fire. LSU clearly, especially with the top half of their lineup, offensively is tremendous, led by Dylan Cruz, Tommy White. Gavin Dugas has been great. And the younger bats are coming along, and they're very talented. Their issue is Thatcher Hurd, the transfer, hasn't worked out coming back from injury and having to change his delivery because of a lower back issue. And Chase Shores, there's some doubt whether he's healthy, a key freshman who stepped up for them. So will the pitching depth be there? Christian Little's going to start in the 3rd spot this week in the Vanderbilt transfer. He essentially failed as the closer, but he has the talent. We'll see. They're still good enough to make a deep run in the tournament, even if they have questions beyond their first 2 starting pitchers, because they have a couple guys in the bullpen who have stepped up. They're a national championship contender, consensus #1 for a reason. Tulane, obviously, I'll leave to him. It's rough. UNO dealing with some pitching injury issues. Tyler LeBlanc, their Friday night starter, will miss a week or 2. There's real question marks outside of Brandon Mitchell, who's been brilliant the past 2 weeks as a starter and was a Southland pitcher of the week. They need to find more pitching. pitching, and they're not hitting top to bottom in a lineup like we normally see from Blake Dean. He's been shuffling the lineup a little bit, trying to find answers there. So looking like middle of the pack Southland right now if they don't step up. Southeastern having some pitching injuries for the second straight year. When everybody's healthy, they're really good and a dangerous team on their level, that if they won the league and went in healthy, they could even do damage in a regional, but they're not quite there right now. They don't have a lot of pop in their lineup. They're more of a team that's able to play small ball and put pressure on you defensively that way. Matt Reiser's sort of mastered the way they play, so never count them out. And obviously Joe Sherman, what he's done at Delgado, they've already got 30 wins this year. It's probably his oldest team because of the COVID effect, so he's got a veteran JUCO team, which is a weird thing to say. So he's got talent and he's got experience. They could go a long way and get to the JUCO World Series easily if they play up to their potential.
Same question.
Yeah. First, I got one quick comment about LSU. Kim Mulkey had a weak schedule in basketball, and we can understand that. I have no idea what was going on with that non-conference schedule LSU played. Was that fun for fans to go watch them just, I mean, they can rake. Every game was a 10-run rule game, and I don't see what you learn about your team.
It was fun for Scott Woodward, though, because of that 10,000+ guaranteed by making sure you play all those home games. So always keep that in mind.
Fair enough. But
Money talks.
LSU has the best pitcher in the country, probably, and they can rake, but we're going to learn a lot more about the rest of their roster. But just with that, you can win a national
It's hard to learn about the depth of your pitching staff when you're playing 7-inning mercy rule.
Exactly, every single game. And Tulane's situation, they were supposed to bank on their hitting because Jay Ullman was the hitting coach. He was the recruiting coordinator. He was the hitting coach. Every key hitter came back for this roster because they loved playing for him. They knew they were going to have pitching issues. They lost most of their pitchers, entered the portal after Travis Jewett got fired, and they've hit like garbage this year. There's no other way to put it. Their team batting average is .234. T.O. Banks, a 12th round draft pick of the Chicago Cubs coming out of high school, was injured for most of last year. Conference tournament was awesome, hit for the cycle in one of the games. They were expecting him to be really an All-America type candidate. Struck out 18 times, I think, in his first 30 at-bats. Ended up out of the lineup. He's come back a little bit, but he's not playing well. Jackson Lynn, the other guy, he was drafted in the 20th round. He was the second leading hitter in the American Athletic Conference last year, but teams found his hole, off-speed pitches. Now the book is out on him. He's been struggling. He's been out of the lineup. And if their hitting isn't going to carry him, they're in trouble because they knew they were going to have to rebuild their whole pitching rotation. The funny thing is their weekend rotations actually become pretty good now, surprisingly, at the end. But it doesn't matter when you can't hit. And I mean, these numbers are unbelievable. They've struck out 10 or more. They're averaging 10 strikeouts a game on offense. They've only won one game this year when they've struck out 10 times or more, and they're a little over 500 when they don't. The hitting's got to come around. The one saving grace is the conference is terrible. There's only one team in the top 100 of the RPI in the league, East Carolina. They're actually playing a series at South Florida this week. They're co-leaders. 4 teams, 2-1. South Florida is 12-18. Tulane's 8-21. It's a game between two co-leaders. The first year Tulane joined the American Athletic Conference, it was the 3rd-rated RPI league. Now I watch a lot of college baseball. It wasn't really the 3rd best college baseball league, but it was rated that high. Last week it was the 13th rated baseball league. It's not just Tulane. It's Houston. It's fallen apart. There's no good team. So Tulane actually has a chance to be competitive in the conference. But when you're 8-21, it doesn't really matter at this point.
And to follow Gary's point, they should have swept Memphis. But they didn't get any hitting in that middle game.
They were lucky to win. They were lucky to win too. They needed T.O. Banks to hit a home run with 2 outs in the bottom of the 9th inning to be the team that they've owned. They've never lost a season series to Memphis since they joined the league. They're playing at South Florida this week. I think Tulane's 2-11 on the road this year. Everything points to they're not going to win this series this weekend. If they do win it, then we'll see what happens.
Well, it's at least easier to go to Florida than it was to L.A. or Seattle or Hawaii, which is talk about a non-conference schedule question.
He scheduled like he had LSU's roster and didn't have to get any home gates. They scheduled to get to the NCAA regional with tough games, and it backfired on them big time because when you're struggling, the worst thing you can possibly do is take cross-country flights and play series like that, and that really set them back.
We got about 3 minutes each. I want you to take Tulane, spring, what you saw so far, and I'd like you to take LSU for me. Okay. Why don't you take it first?
Yeah, it was a good spring. I'm not a big believer in the huge significance of spring football in general. It's funny, Willie Fritz's first comment after the spring game was, thank God nobody got hurt and thank God it's over. Right. Because his biggest concern is actually losing somebody, which Tulane didn't. But no, it was an overall productive spring. The key for the team last year, they hit the transfer portal hard and did it brilliantly. They hit on every single guy. That's not going to happen again because that was a once in a lifetime accomplishment. But it looks like they're successful in the transfer portal again. They brought in some defensive backs because that's an area where they lost a lot of guys. They brought in Andre Sam from Marshall. He ended up as a first teamer. They brought in a guy from Nebraska Kearney, who's trying to follow in the footsteps of Shea Wyatt, who came from the same conference in Division II and led the team in receiving the last 2 years. That guy ended up being a star. Darius Swanson ended up being the starter. So I think they've hit the transfer portal again, and it's key. Their defense, they lost a lot on defense. They lost their 3 best players, and I saw the defense still look pretty good this spring. Tyler Grubbs, Holy Cross product, went to Tech, unbelievably productive at Tech. Tulane didn't recruit him out of high school. That was a mistake. He's turned out he had a huge interception in the spring game where he tipped the ball to himself. They needed a linebacker, so I saw all positives, and of course, Michael Pratt coming back is just huge. I mean, that's no the deal. Yeah.
LSU still in spring, but your thoughts so far?
So far, I think that they've been able to get the reps that they've needed at positions where they need to figure out with so many newcomers. Second year in a row, they're really doing that at cornerback. I think that's going to be crucial, but the talent level there is exceptional, so it should work out well. They've seemed to have avoided major injuries so far, knock on wood, for Brian Kelly and his team at this point. And they've got some young pass rushers with some experienced Power 5 transfers dealing with the need at defensive end / the opposite edge rusher, the outside spots, to be able to put pressure on the quarterback. They don't want to have to use Harold Perkins, who's only a 220-pound guy, having to play off the edge much. They want to use him as a weapon, not as a necessity, and he's getting more time to be a traditional linebacker so he can be a every down threat with his skill set. So I think that's important on the defensive side. Obviously, offensively, they played with a young line last year. It's really promising with the building depth up front. You have to win in the trenches in the SEC. The competition, so to speak, with Jalen Daniels, who's clearly the starter, is going to be interesting with Garrett Nussmeier, who will put pressure on him to be consistent from game to game, and they like how both of those guys are performing so far in the spring. You do have to replace some talent at wide receiver, I should say, because you don't know what you have as far as every down guys outside of Malik Neighbors, but they're bringing in a good mix of young guys there, and that's a place where LSU's always able to find first-year talent out of the high school ranks, so I don't think they're that concerned about that. I still wonder about the running back spot, though. They weren't dynamic there last year. They're really banged up. Trey Holly, who's the leading rusher in Louisiana high school history out of Union Parish, he's getting a lot of reps this spring because of those injuries, and that could pay off huge dividends if he's the player they think he is. Because
do you think he is?
I think he's really good. I think he might be more along the lines of that Clyde Edwards-Helaire type, which can be a fantastic college back. I don't know about superstar, but if he can just be healthy and be consistent like he was on the high school level, and you can complement the running game, and with Daniels in particular being a running game unto himself, they can have the balance they need moving forward. They're in the right direction. They're definitely a top 10 team. Will they be a team that's making the college football playoff? There's still a lot to be determined there, and I'm sure they'll shop a little bit more for a couple spots in the transfer portal, but they don't have major needs right now. Brian Kelly stabilized things there in a hurry.
What about a minute left? Is Tulane the favorite now in the AAC?
They will be the favorite, and it'll be the first time in school history that they've been picked to win a league in any conference in the preseason. With Houston leaving the league, with Cincinnati leaving the league, with UCF leaving the league, there's a void there. UTSA won Conference USA. They'll probably be picked second, but Tulane's in a better league, and Tulane won that league, and they returned their quarterback. If you do those things, you're picked first in the league, whether you deserve it or not, and I think Tulane does deserve it, but with Michael Pratt returning, Tulane having won the league, and with the league losing its other top teams, Tulane will be the preseason favorite to win.
And I wonder, the only question I have is, I know they've got a lot of quality backs, but replacing Spears is a big deal. Who's going to step up to be, I would guess, part of more of a rotation than we saw last year?
I think Shotty Clayton Johnson is going to have a 1,000-yard year this year. He looked very good in the spring. He's not Tyjae Spears, although you talk to him, he's as confident as Tyjae Spears. He talks about the NFL every time he talks, but he looked good in the spring. But that's true. I mean, Tyjae Spears is a once in a generation player for Tulane. He was so good. Yes. It was ridiculous.
Whoever gets him in the third round, I'm hearing third round, absolute steal. If somebody's smart, they'll grab him in the second.
Airline Drive. Come on, please. There you go. Jude Young, Guerry Smith, thanks so much for being with us today here on Inside New Orleans Sports. Great job as always. All right, thanks so much for tuning in. Remember, plenty of ways to catch our program now. There's a QR code on your screen. You click the QR code with your phone. It'll take you right to the WLAE-TV YouTube page or my website, ericasher.com. Also, again, set your DVR for your favorite time slot, and you'll never miss the program. And also, I want to remind everybody, Jude Young on All Access. That's Tuesday at 6 to 7. And, of course, it's at 106.1 FM. Myself, 4 to 6 weekdays on 106.1 FM. You can listen live at ericasher.com. Also, the WLAE-TV YouTube page, as well as you can check us out on the iHeartRadio app and the TuneIn Radio app as well. Our podcast is on Anchor, Spotify, so check us there. And as always, we appreciate you guys checking out the program. Also want to thank our underwriters who make this show possible, and of course the WLA production staff, Ron Yeager, Jim Dotson, Logan Graffia, also Alex Chacon, and my director, William Hill. Happy Passover, happy Easter to each and every one of you. Again, special thanks to Guerry Smith and also to Jude Young. I'm Eric Asher. We'll see you next week for another edition of Inside New Orleans Sports. And I have no idea what that was.
Saturdays at 2 p.m.
You're watching WLAE, New Orleans Public Television.